I'm Eric Sinclair, and this is Case 28 Analysis, Managing Training in a Manufacturing Setting. Our instructional designer is Natalie Morales. She is a new ID graduate. She just earned her master's, and this is really her first real case. She has worked with her professor before and done some stuff with him, but this is really the first time she set out on her own to complete a job. She was assigned to work at ChipX, which is a computer chip processing plant, also known as Wafers. This is a company that is really all around the world, has many different factories, and the stakeholders for this job include more or less all ChipX employees and clients, because they all have a stake in really whether or not she can complete her goal of organizing the instruction. The certification needed for each employee, they have to take a class to really be able to work in the factory to begin with, and that's factory-wide. I assume it's probably company-wide as well. There's also certifications to be able to operate machinery solo, and these range from level 1 to level 4. Level 1 is the most basic, and that's just the basic requirement to be able to operate the machinery. Level 4, however, is the most advanced, and that means that the operator can not only operate the machinery but also use preventative measures to make sure the machinery doesn't break down, and they can also fix the machinery if they happen to break down. So the level 1 is the easiest to obtain. The level 4 is quite a bit harder and requires a lot more hours work. The training that's provided to get certified is a one-on-one peer mentoring system. Trainers have to be at least level 3 certified to be able to train their peers. And essential skills must be performed and demonstrated on command to become certified on machinery. And they said that this training can range from a few weeks to many weeks, and it just depends on the type of machinery and the complexity of that device. Natalie interviewed Michelle, the supervisor, on her first day on the job, and she was already uncovering some issues with the whole training process and the whole factory to begin with. The first issue that came up was that the supervisors have different preferences for ratio of level 1 to 4s, meaning some supervisors like to have a lot of level 1s so that they can put a lot of different people on a lot of different machinery. Some prefer to have a few higher level operators, I assume, because that means that if machinery breaks down, it can be fixed with ease, as comparing to hiring some outside work or someone on call to come in and fix it. Another problem was that supervisors are evaluated based on the number of certifications they hand out, seeing as level 1s are a lot easier to obtain than level 4s. They tend to get paid more based on having a lot of level 1s, or get higher evaluations, which leads into the next point, which is the criteria for raises. Their evaluation is heavily tied to their raises, meaning the more certifications they have, the higher their evaluations will be, and the more money they will make. So they tend to go for a lot of level 1 certifications, meaning if they do that, they can make more money or have the potential to make more money. The assumption that I had here, however, was that many level 1 certifications will lead to less productivity. As most people probably know, machines are bound to break down in a factory setting. If you don't have higher level certification people who are working in your factory, that means you're going to have to outsource for some type of repair company to come in and fix the equipment. And that means that there could be times where the factory is just shut down completely and nobody can move on with their job, especially in an assembly line type process. Natalie also interviewed Hector and Tran, which were two of the most experienced trainers on the job, and these also revealed some issues that popped up. First of all, the two workers really felt like training takes away from work time. I know from my experience in a factory, some people just tend to want to work. They want to be in their own little zone, and they don't like to have somebody watching over their shoulder the entire time. So this can become an issue, as it appears here with Hector and Tran. Also, trainers are motivated by the number of certifications given because their pay and rating is directly tied to it. It's kind of the same thing with the supervisors. The more trainees that the trainers pass through, eventually the more money they can make. This leads to an inconsistent assessment because, as it appeared, Hector and Tran kind of had a little argument about how one of them was passing people along more easily than the other. One was being really thorough, and one was just letting them slide by. And that was perceived as happening because of the money tied to it. Also, supervisors' inconsistency and expectation can result in trainer confusion. They're not sure if they want to train lots of level 1s or if they want to continue on training level 3s and 4s to get the higher certifications. So what they see is that as trainers rotate through, the ratio isn't fitting what they want their plan to be, and really the trainers don't know what to do from that point on. So it creates a lot of confusion when the expectations aren't the same. My assumption here is that trainers let people pass their certifications more easily when their pay is raised because of it, which really can lead to more mistakes in the workplace. Again, if you are passing somebody along that doesn't deserve it, they're probably not going to be as productive, and they're probably going to make some mistakes, which can then have the reverse effect of what the trainers obviously wanted in the first place. Now moving on to the main ID problems that I picked out and some of my group members picked out as well. The first one was the certification process incentives. The training certification process is tied to monetary benefits and evaluations. As a result, safety, legal, and quality assurance issues may arise. It's a big problem in a factory. We determined that we needed some more information here. We needed to decide what the current differences are in training, meaning how are some trained compared to others? What really is going on from trainer to trainer, and what are the differences? And we also decided that we need to look into potential alternative incentives, such as maybe productivity increase rather than just certification increase. Potential solutions. We thought it would be a good idea to implement a trainer evaluation system. That way the trainers are ensured that they are doing everything the way they're supposed to. They kind of have a little bit more accountability there rather than just passing people through. We also thought it might be a good idea to have a rotation of trainers so that not one matchup is consistently going on throughout the factory. That you can't just get on with one person, earn all your certifications, and then just be done. That way that it ensures fairness, and I think part of the trainer evaluation system could be the trainee's evaluation of the trainer and how well they think they're actually being trained. Another ID problem that came up was that the certification process is not standardized, meaning there are no clear objectives to be met, and the assessment process is unclear. This is a huge, huge problem because, again, it ties right in with trainers' expectations. How are the trainers supposed to know what they're supposed to be assessing and what they're supposed to be testing if that's not clearly communicated? More information that needs to be found here are really what are the essential learning objectives? What do the trainers need to be teaching? What do the trainees need to know in order to be certified? And Aaron also had a good point that we need to probably validate the previous training that's already happened, maybe retest each trainee on their machine and make sure that they really do know the skills that they're supposed to know, and this will help with quality assurance. Potential solutions, again, hold trainers and trainees accountable with common assessments. Common assessments meaning you take the same test from one trainer to the next. It's not going to change. Don't think you're going to get any easier because you're training with your buddy or anything like that. It's got to be held the same across the board, and that'll hold both trainers and trainees accountable. The third ID problem that came up was the language barrier. And language barriers can become an issue in the training process, obviously because the communication is so important throughout that entire process. Some information here is a language needs analysis and any language education options that might be available. Obviously, we need to look at what type of languages our trainers need to know based on the trainees we have available. And language education options, preferably ones that are cost effective. Obviously, educating on language is probably something that most manufacturing companies are not going to want to do. Therefore, one potential solution is to just make language a prerequisite. For example, hiring only English and Spanish speaking individuals, or maybe Vietnamese, depending on what you have as a trainer. Obviously, it's going to cost a lot of resources to educate, so it may be the smarter move just to hire people who are already immersed in that language and familiar with it. Also, hybrid training could be another option. We thought of maybe online as an idea, partial online, partial demonstrating the skill, or partial training manual in the native language and partial demonstrating the skill. Those may be a little bit cheaper options than language education. Another ID problem that came up was the one-on-one peer training because it limits the amount of time that trainers actually can get their work done. The information here that we need is preferably data from outsourced training. They had mentioned that before they did the one-on-one peer training, they had hired another company to come in and train individuals. And I am curious really just to see how productivity and mistakes and accidents, things like that, how that got affected when they switched over to a peer training system. And I'd also like to know what are the consequences of training versus working, meaning why are Hector and Tran so worried about training instead of working? What are they missing out on by just working? And I think there's something that could be brought up here is who are your workers who really enjoy training and wouldn't mind doing it full time, which is one of the potential solutions here, was to hire full-time trainers, employees that really enjoy just doing the training and wouldn't mind doing it all the time and maybe get some fulfillment out of that. That may save those workers like Hector and Tran who would rather just work and may kind of increase overall morale in the factory. Also, the apprenticeship system, it might be a good idea to use that as well and form a closer bond between certain members of the staff, and especially with the language barrier and things like that, it might not be a bad idea. I realize that's kind of contradicting what I was saying with the rotating trainers, but it is another potential solution and something to look at. ID problem number 5 is the supervisor's preferences. And again, we mentioned that some prefer the ratio of high to low level certifications. Some prefer the low to high. So they're constantly changing what is expected. And the information needed here, we need the most effective ratio, because when we find that out, we really have something better to shoot for. And a matrix for preferences wouldn't be a bad idea, but I think it should be really tied into what the most effective ratio is. Cynthia also brought up a good point as who developed the motto, because if this is an international company and somebody, something that is done at every single factory, that's not probably something you can change. The motto is own your own development, and so we need to kind of check that and see if that's more of like a plant-wide thing or a company-wide, because really I think it's kind of a stupid idea. I get what they were trying to do with this, but it's not probably the best, because they really need to go where they're needed. And if the boss needs you to learn this certification so he can complete a shift, that's really what they should be going for, not like, go and get this done if you want. I understand what they were doing, but it's probably not the best way. Potential solutions is to, again, kind of use that most effective ratio and develop and schedule people based on need. Okay, you're going to have to fill spots in order to hit every piece of machinery for the assembly line to work. And the best way to do it is to use that most effective ratio of high to low certification people to get the job done. And that was my presentation. Thanks for listening.